Have you lost your job? Have you lost a loved one? Are you exhausted caring for your parents, for your kids? Well, you can find immediate relief when you read Sheila Mac's new #1 bestseller, Bootstraps and Bra Straps. It contains the Boots formula to move from rock bottom back into action in any situation, especially right now. If life has knocked you down, pick yourself up with Bootstraps and Bra Straps. Get your copy at www.SheilaMac.com today.
Are you ready for a reboot? Welcome to the Sheila Mac Show, reality at its finest. History reminds us those hit hardest often become the change makers. This year, we've all hit crazy economic, social, and emotional rock bottoms. We all get knocked down. Something hits globally, locally, personally. It affects our health, finances, our relationships. We have to recreate a business or career. Each show, Sheila and her special guest will be sharing their reboot stories, guiding you with real solutions to upgrade and up-level emotionally, mentally, physically, spiritually, and financially. Here on NBC's KCAA Radio, Mondays at 1 and Wednesdays at 7 p.m. Pacific Time. If you're ready to pull yourself up by the bootstraps and bra straps, enjoy a listen. Here's Sheila. Are you ready for a reboot? Welcome to the Sheila Mac Show, reality at its finest. History reminds us those hit hardest often become the change makers. This year, we've all hit crazy economic, social, and emotional rock bottoms. We all get knocked down. Something hits globally, locally, personally. It affects our health, finances, our relationships. We have to recreate a business or career. Each show, Sheila and her special guest will be sharing their reboot stories, guiding you with real solutions to upgrade and up-level emotionally, mentally, physically, spiritually, and financially. Here on NBC's KCAA Radio, Mondays at 1 and Wednesdays at 7 p.m. Pacific Time. If you're ready to pull yourself up by the bootstraps and bra straps, enjoy a listen. Here's Sheila.
Welcome to the Sheila Mac Show, reality at its finest. Here we have real people sharing real stories and actionable steps to help you reinvent, rebuild, and reboot your life on your terms. I'm your host, Sheila Mac, and today we have Madelaine Claire Weiss here. She is an NBA LICSW.
Licensed Independent Clinical Social Worker.
There you go. And a board-certified executive career and life coach. She is a blogger, podcast guest expert, speaker, trainer, and published author. When she was 15, her father died of a stroke. Okay, yes, that's hard. And spirited as she was, Madelaine always believed her father died of her, for her, until the day she learned.
I can tell that story.
Okay, so you're going to tell that story.
I'm going to tell that story.
So she has a lot that she's going to share about how to rebuild after tough situations like that this year. And related to my new book, my bestseller, Bootstraps and Bra Straps, the formula to go from rock bottom back into action in any situation. This year, we have had so many situations. And so I'm happy to have you on the show, Madelaine, as a special guest to share your expertise on this subject.
Thank you for having me. It is a pleasure to be here, and I have something special for you and your audience before we're finished today that I live by, and so do all of my clients. And so I want to share that with you. Back to that story. It's ironic that that story set me up for these really tough times. Mm-hmm. So I was a very spirited child, and I spoke truth to power more than I should have, that power being my dad. Mm-hmm. And it is true that when he passed away for many years, I felt that it was because of me. until one day at the cemetery, I broke down with my mother, and I was into my adulthood by this point. And she said, "No, honey, it wasn't you, it was work." So now I help working people learn how to master their minds so that they can have more hours in the day for themselves and their families, and more peace of mind, and therefore more health and freedom and fulfillment, maintaining their high achievement without burning out. And what I mean by that set me up for this, because I was grounded so much. I spent a lot of time alone.
Yeah.
So when we all got locked down, that was kind of like more my comfort zone than it is for lots of other people. So I had learned how to use my time when I'm alone a long time ago.
Right.
And that really comes in handy now for me, but not everybody is like that. And there are some people who are more extroverted than that, and who really need the kind of social interaction that we're not so easy to come by right now. So how do they deal with that?
Yes, that's so true. And I was blessed with being an only child myself. So I too got to learn I was in nature, I was in the hills, and I would take these long, beautiful walks alone. I'd be left alone for hours and hours. And it's funny, I am the most social person, yet I love the balance of having that time to kind of recharge when I'm alone. And I've never really felt lonely alone. And I think that's the blessing in when you're an only child and you have those kind of situations.
Yeah. So what seemed more like a minus than a plus early on for me, and perhaps for you, really kind of gave us tools. You could say, unfortunately, but now it's fortunate for us. But not everyone has that, and the mental health statistics are through the roof. So many people are really struggling. The people that I work with are actually fortunate enough to still be working, but there was something about the downtime that really, I was going to say raised questions, but I don't think so. I think the questions were already there, but they came to light about, it's sort of like everybody had a midlife crisis. Like, is this all there is? And is this how I want to spend the rest of my life? Yeah. So it kind of opened the way for everybody to take a look at what was in their toolkit and what more was perhaps needed for them to go forward on the best possible footing. I'm going to tell you that the first line of my book that's coming out in March is this, and I think this applies to everyone. A great life depends on a great fit between who we are and the environments in which we live and work. So when people are unhappy, something in there is out of alignment. So something in there is against our true nature.
Yeah.
So, and that plays out very differently for each person. But I found, I sort of looked back one day and I said, what is it that's working for people? And so I reverse engineered this 5-step process, and the people are so different. They're different by nature. Their life circumstances are completely different. Their gender is different. Their age is everything is different. But they all go through this process that starts with believing life can be great. I mean, you look around now and you say, are you kidding me? But I'm not, because if life is what our thoughts make it, that's one of the Stoics, Marcus Aurelius, we can make it something that feels better for us. And you know that because you wrote a book about it, right?
Yes, yes. And the seeds of the book came at 2017, the Ventura fires in California. I just moved into a new house, lost my home, all my belongings, my cat, my car.
Oh my God.
Once. And within a month, I was using my own formula to get back on track. And I thought, wow, I had to live. Luckily, I had a rental property that was a prefab cabin in the hills. And I had made it into a vacation rental. So that was like really helpful since, it takes a long time to get any money back from insurance, let me tell you, years.
Yeah.
And a lot of fighting. And then you get your money, a little piece of it, and you pay off whatever you owe to the land on that house. But, so anyway, so I had that, and I literally lived in a 400 square foot room that was like the washroom for where I kept the linens and to clean the units. And I'm like, wow, I got demoted pretty fast. Holy smokes. Like I had this nice, beautiful home and a relaxing, beautiful car. And it was environment matters so much, like your points in your book, because I had a yoga deck and I had a prefab mobile home that was I was a super host people because of the way I designed it. And I designed it on a penny. They love to return there and visit up in the hills in the cabin. And it was the environment. Then I had this used beater car one of my kids loaned me, and I put these stickers from the dollar store inside. And my son said, "Oh, you souped it up." And I said, "I'm going to make it the most beautiful, happy beater car. It's going to be the classiest car I could ever drive, even though it's a beater car." And I made it the best out of the environment I had at the moment, knowing things will continue to get better over time.
Sheila, the minute you said cabin in the hills, I wrote down cabin in the hills because you had already told us that nature was your happy place.
Yes.
And so you started, correct me if I'm wrong, but you started with that kernel of goodness and beauty and truth and built from there. Mm-hmm. What a wonderful lesson, right?
Yes, and it really was. And I thought other people are going to feel alone going through tough times, and how can I help, and what kind of resources can I provide? And now I have this show too, so I have other people with other books and more resources, because when we're together in community, we don't feel so alone, and we're able to get back on track quicker and get through it easier.
And of course, there's a certain kind of relationship with oneself that gets short shrift sometimes. Mm-hmm. That we all know you can be in a crowded room and feel alone. Mm-hmm. And when people feel most alone, I find and I believe that it's because they're cut off from a part of themselves. Mm-hmm. I'm going to speculate that even through the trauma of everything that was stripped away, you might have even gotten closer to the most precious parts of you somehow.
Yes, it was a very healing time. It was a sacred time, a lot of meditation and thought, replanning, and it directed me to new and even better things than I could even have imagined.
Well, I think that is what so many of my clients were going through. Mm-hmm. Everything slowed down, everything shut down, and the question became, who am I? Mm-hmm. Who am I really?
Yes.
And once we're able to hear the question, we're also able to hear an answer. So.
And I think that it's really important that when you go through that, I think everybody, when they really get to find who they really are, beyond the masks, we have to wear masks now, but we really have to take them off to discover who we really are. And when we go through it, we all realize, hey, I kind of like who I am. I like who I am a lot. I'm really good with this, because when you're in your essence and your truth and you're really showing up as yourself, it's just easier. You're just having fun no matter what you're doing. And all you're being and all you're doing is who you're being, how you show up. It doesn't matter if you have to roll your sleeves up, do 3 extra jobs to get by this year, something like that. I had to do a lot of those things that weren't my favorite things to get on track again. But I was okay because it was who I was being, and I kept that as a mantra. And I kept saying that.
So we know that the human mind wanders about 70% of the time. When you're doing things that you're not as accustomed to doing, and especially if they're strenuous, which it sounds like some of it was, your mind is not wandering the way it does when we're doing our ordinary going to the office kind of a life. So when the mind is wandering, it's wandering to the past, well, woulda, shoulda, coulda, regrets kind of thing, or it's worrying about the future. So either of those places kind of pull you down and sap the joy. But when you're really focused, in fact, on my website, I have some complementary exercises, and one of them is focus and release, which is how to be really present with what you're doing. So I study, believe it or not, Advaita Vedanta pre-Hindu tradition, which I just kind of fell into 20 years ago, and I'm still studying it because the material from them is just so useful and so true. And what they say is that the bliss is on the working surface. So you may have heard of this from Mikhail Csikszentmihalyi. I wanted to make sure I didn't butcher that, who wrote Flow.
Yeah.
So when people are really paying attention, which if you're chopping wood, you better be paying attention, right? So those kinds of activities where you're really focused on what you're doing really are blissful. So we can all have that. So when you're washing the dishes,
yeah,
where the sponge hits the dish, or if you're listening to a speaker where the sound of the voice hits your ear. So all of those things, if we put the mind, and this is why I say I help people learn how to manage or master their minds, put the mind on the working surface, what we're actually doing, it's not going into past regrets and it's not going into future worries. And then if you stop people and you say, how do you feel? And they go, I feel fine.
Yes.
You know, so.
Yes, I think I was definitely in that flow for sure in all I was doing. And it was almost like whenever I veer from it, I had that mantra that would like, oh yes, and all I'm being, how am I showing up and who am I serving and how is that going to make a difference and affect everything? And I'd get back and I'd be able to go back into that flow state. And I'm like, I'm good. Yes, I'm painting the house myself because the budget's trimmed and I have to do this and that. And, you know, whatever I needed to do, I was okay with. And of course, there were people looking at me like, okay, she's flipped her mind. She's, you know, she's decorated her beater car and she thinks she's going to get back on track. And I did. And I was like, I just believed I'm just taking the next right action and the next right action. They were little teeny steps. It wasn't like 1 second you're going to be from one thing to the next. It was really small actions.
I may have not mentioned this to you before. In 2004, I had the same experience that you just described. I had flesh-eating disease. Believe it. I mean, it's such a crazy thing. Like, who gets that? Yeah. But I had that. And people said to me, it made you so strong because I did what you did, 1 foot in front of the other, get the dog taken care of. I was on call for my work 24/7, 365. So I had to make sure that there was coverage and, you know, just one thing after another. Plus all the care that I had to make sure it went all right with the bandages and the medication and all this kind of stuff. And people said afterwards, it made you so strong. And I said, thank you, but that's not it. Mm-hmm. It shows us, and I have a feeling you're going to agree with me, but tell me if you don't. It doesn't make us strong. It shows us how strong we all are. Yeah. And most people don't even know what's in them, because fortunately they don't need to know. But you needed to dig deep and pull out what was there, and I needed to dig deep and pull out what was there, but it was always there.
Yes.
It was always there. It didn't get there because something bad happened.
Yes.
It's like there, ready, willing, and able to help us. And I believe everybody has that.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Part of our human nature. It's a good part, a really good part of our human nature. So
very, very helpful part. And I think it's calling on those strong parts. One of the exercises I have is to review other times you've gone through tough situations and who you needed to be. How did you need to show up to get through that? Because that same energy, that same part of you is who's going to get you through maybe this year or whatever situation you might be facing this year.
So I have an interesting anecdote about that. The who you needed to be. I was on this path of emotional regulation. So I was on this path where I was always going to be very calm and in command, and I was meditating and all that good stuff, which I do believe serves well, but even that can be overused. Mm-hmm. So I went to the ER. It's funny, I hadn't planned on talking about this today, but it seems on point. Yeah. I went to the ER because my elbow was sore and my hand was shaking, and I don't ever get sick, knock on wood, you know? So this seemed, I thought maybe I was having a stroke because there was a stroke in my family. I didn't know what was going on. I went to the ER. I'm going to make the long story short, but they sent me home a couple times, and they wrote in my medical records how pleasant I was. And if I learned one lesson from that experience, is that there's a time and a place for pleasant, and it's not all the time. Yeah. That we also have in us the ability to raise the roof, which I should have done, because had they put an IV in the first time or the second time, it took me 3 times.
Oh, wow.
And by the time I got into the hospital, it was all blown up and black and blue and all this. It was horrible. And they said something about we could put a line in and give you antibiotic, but the medicine cabinets are closed. I'm thinking, no, they're not. This is the hospital. The medicine cabinets can't be closed. So my overall takeaway from that is that managing our emotions doesn't mean that we're always pleasant.
Right.
That there's a time and a place for all of the emotions that we all have in our nature. So if you think of them again in the toolkit, the art and science of living can be said to be knowing which tool to pull out when. So that's what I learned from.
I love that. And it's so true to give yourself permission and have space and a way to get out emotions that's in a healthy way. So for instance, I did lose my youngest son to a heart condition in December. And so, Parkinson White syndrome. And it was very hard on all of us. And one of the things I told all my kids, the grown college kids came home with COVID and everything, you know, the dorms got closed. And I said, you know what, if you need to scream, if you need to yell, if you feel like crying today, we have permission to do that at home. We got to, you know, get it out and talk. If you want to talk, you need to wake me up at 3 a.m. Come wake me up and we'll talk about it. And, you know, they got grief therapy, and, you know, it's a healing journey. You never get over it. You just learn to deal with it differently, I guess. But it
what a good mama you are.
Yes, it really helped. I really
feel that, because remember, I was a little girl who didn't find out until she was grown up that her father's death wasn't her fault. If I had had you for my mama, I probably would have gotten that out a lot earlier.
Yes, that really is. And I think so. If you're listening in, give yourself permission, or your family, loved ones, kids, young adult kids, or younger kids, the permission they need to express those emotions. There's a little love. We see your puppy there. Get those out. We actually got a puppy dog. We call it that's our therapy dog. We all joke about it, and she's such a love. She's the most loving dog ever, just like yours. But it was like, I thought I was done with having pets at home, but yet it was like, well, we're going to be home, and we're going to work and go to school from home now. And a couple of them, I have 6, I adopted 3, and 3 are mine. And so it was one of those things. And now we have this beautiful pet that happened as well. And so those things, if you're alone, maybe it is a nice time to adopt a pet if you're up for that, because they're giving us hugs. They're giving us, you could talk to the pet, even you could talk to your puppy or your kitten or whoever you have there, and you're able to have that when maybe you're staying alone. Maybe you're in a state where you're still doing some social distancing, depending on the laws, or your health needs or whatever. So that is, I think, a really healthy way to also get through this year, and then connecting like this on the radio with other people, call people, message people.
Well, I push back on the Zoom thing. People say, oh my God, I can't stand the Zoom. And I feel like it's saving lives when you consider the mental health crisis and how much we need to connect. When I moved to DC, which is where I am now, in 2013, somebody said to me, and I was going to look for office space, and somebody said to me, what do you need an office for? Nobody wants to come to your office. They have to get in the car, they have to park, and why don't you do this? And so I attended a psychotherapy conference. There were thousands of people there. The guru from California, who was in charge then, and this was a long time ago, said, you're all going to use VC, which is the platform that I use for my clients. And Johns Hopkins uses it, and NASA uses it. So I figured, well, if I ever have to defend myself for having done that, because it was kind of new then, I could always say I was in really good company. So I tried it. And my first client was in communications, and he said to me, which was just what I needed to hear, he said, I've never felt this connected to anyone. And it was the first time I was doing what you and I are doing. So since 2013, I've been using teleconference. And so when COVID happened, there wasn't any shift for me. And I know how well people can communicate, and a lot of people think you can't. And so I want everybody to hear this, that it's actually really nice, and something people can avail themselves of so that they do stay in touch. And that's good for us. So
that is. And I know that one thing that I found out about not too long ago is there is a resource number that's 211. Have you heard of the 211? No. 211. So remember, we used to dial 411 to get information.
Yeah.
Okay. So now this is something people don't know.
Okay.
That we share on every show. It's the 211. So if you Google 211 and your state, you will get a list of all the free resources. If you need to get meals, if you need to get housing assistance, anything with mental health, or maybe your health insurance from your company went away and you need help figuring that out. They're going to give you all those resources, suicide hotline, help to get off of addictions. And so that's something, yeah, that's really important to, I'm like the unofficial spokesperson for them, because I was
no, that's fantastic.
Yes,
we have a something called the Foggy Bottom Village, and they're all over the area, and they're organizations. It was supposed to be for people aging in place. But they provide lots of different kinds of services, and I volunteer for them.
Wow.
And and I volunteered to be buddies with, like this, with people who are isolated. And I was interested when you said, when you were feeling most down, you said, who can I serve? That's another thing that I think a lot of people, I want a lot of people to know, that the service is so nourishing. Especially, sometimes we feel depleted because we're struggling with whatever we're struggling with. And it's hard to imagine having the resources to extend to someone else, but extending the resources to others actually gives you more energy, and a really kind of positive energy. So it kind of recharges your own batteries, even though that's not why we do it, but there's just something about the service. So it wasn't lost on me that you said that when you were thinking, who can I serve?
And it's like when you feel lonely, pick up. When I feel lonely, I felt lonely a few times. I mean, we were 3 months, we were on lockdown completely. Nothing was open. The community center, nothing was open in our town, really. And so anytime I felt kind of down, I would start checking in on all my friends. I got a ton of friends. And by the time an hour was gone, people would call back. They were like, wow, I was feeling lonely. I was like, me too, let's talk. And the next thing you know, I wasn't alone anymore. So when you're reaching out to help others,
we're never alone.
Yes. And it's so beautiful. And it was so helpful. And I thought, okay, it may be that when I'm feeling this, I might just be feeling somebody else's need. And I just pick up the phone, or message, text, call, depending on the person. And it really, every single time, there's somebody that really needed that call.
And afterwards, how do you feel?
And I feel great. Afterwards, I'm like, I feel so good because I was in contribution. I got out of my, Tony Robbins says, get out of your head and into your heart. And you just forget about it. And I felt connected. And because we were so isolated, even though I'm not really a lonely person when I'm alone, I still needed to have that communication with people. Yeah. And so it's been very helpful to do that.
Well, that teaching that I told you about, the premise of that is that we are all connected all the time. Anyway, we don't have the awareness that we are all connected, but we are. And from that framework, we're never alone.
Yes.
So
true.
Yeah, I feel that.
Yeah, it's really interesting. You could even, I don't know if you've ever experienced this, where I've had times where my daughter and I, or my sons and I, will be talking about somebody, and we'll be like, hey, how's so-and-so? They will call us or message at that very moment, and we'll be like, whoa, look who it is. And it's like they feel it. And there's this study of water, Dr. Emoto, that they put love, or they put a beautiful word on water, on a vessel of water, and they'll look at the molecular structure. And if they put peace and love on it, or something beautiful, they see beautiful snowflakes, and the molecular structure changes to something beautiful. Now, if they put a hate or anger, blah, 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 these negative, then the water gets all ugly.
So I don't doubt anything, because I think that my little pea brain, and believe me when I tell you, a professor of mine told me I had epistemic hunger, means I had to be like learning all the time. So I've studied a lot and I've been around for a long time. So I've studied a lot and I've taken a lot in, and I still feel that I don't know nothing. Like there's so many big questions about the universe. And there's Michael Pollan.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you ever, he wrote The Omnivore's Dilemma. He has a new book, or a newer book, it's probably a year or two old now, that has a chapter in it about the human mind and how the senses can hardly take in any of the bits of information that are thrown at it. Therefore, our notion of reality is so small, and that's so uncomfortable that we try to make it all fit together into a story. And then we think the story is reality. And then we live in the story. And not only that, then we try to get other people to go along with our story. And it's just a story. And so I always say to people, if we made up the story in the first place, we could make up a better one.
Yes.
Because it's just a story. We're all living like in a story, which is a big idea. But when you read about the brain science, how many bits of information come at us per second, and then how many of those we can take in, which is so small. So it's humbling, but it's also really inspiring, because it is possible. And you're the poster child. It's possible to create. I always say, create the world you want to live in, and you did that.
Yeah, I think that through this year and all these tough situations globally that we've faced, people get to go home and they're thinking about, wait a minute, I'm going to rewrite this story now, and it's going to be on my terms. It's going to be different. It's going to be even better. However good it was, it's going to be even better than that. That's what I see a lot of, and it's an opportunity.
I'm seeing that too. I'm seeing that too, which is why, even though I know that so many people are struggling, what I also know is that a lot of people aren't. A lot of people are really blossoming.
Yeah.
And I like being a part of that creation, because that's kind of what it is. So the thing that I wanted to share with you, which you may already know, and you could tell me, is that as we're making new decisions, so the story that we've been living in that maybe wasn't the best story is a decision that we made, that this was how we're going to piece it together, and this is how we're going to think about it and feel it and live in it, whatever. So when we decide we want to make a new decision about our life, which you're saying, and I'm also saying a lot of people are doing now, you want that decision making to come from the higher brain. So the more emotional, lower down part of the brain can say to us, I don't like what's going on here. And the higher brain can say, thank you for sharing. I got it from here, because we don't want the emotional brain. And a lot of the ideas of the emotional brain were like put there when we were 5 years old. We figured out in the schoolyard how to do our business in the world. So we can say to that adorable little 5-year-old who meant so well, thank you so much for serving me as well as you have, but I'm going to take care of it from here. So if you could just like go watch TV or color or whatever it is that you do, because I have business to take care of for us. Some people tell me they want to kill it off, and I don't recommend that. I believe in making friends with it and being grateful to the ego. We're talking about the ego here. So how we kick it upstairs.
Right.
I have this 30-second mindset reset. Do you know that one? Do you know that?
Tell me.
Good.
Yeah.
It'll be fun to show you that. So it's 3 breaths. And for me, it's under 30 seconds. I don't know how long it will take you. And we certainly don't want to rush it. We want it to be 3 luxurious breaths. What's different about the breaths is that the belly goes out on the in breath. So anxious breathing, yeah, I know. It's different. So it comes very naturally to me now, but when I first did it, it felt really weird. I couldn't even think it the way you were just trying to like, what was that? Yeah. So anxious breathing, we fill up the lungs, and the more we do that, the more anxious we feel. So in this case, it's like the belly, it's like a balloon, and you're filling the balloon with air when you breathe in through the nose. So just everybody try that once. So you're really extending, pushing your belly out. And then on the out breath, it comes all the way back in. So if I'm looking at you, I shouldn't even see your shoulders move. If you were filling your lungs, I would see you, shoulders move, but you're not doing that. So you'll be balanced and upright. And we can do this now that everybody has tried one, filling the belly and then emptying the belly. So balanced and upright, top of the head parallel with the sky. Chin tucked in slightly. And now we're going to take 3 luxurious breaths with the belly out on the in breath and the belly in on the out breath. And you may close your eyes or simply gaze downward. How was that?
Very peaceful.
So what that does, it's not just about calm. It's about, which is good too. It's about clear. It's about focus. You want to be clear-headed and able to focus with your highest faculties. So there's something called the polyvagal nerve that runs all the way through the body up through the brain. And these breaths stimulate that nerve, which takes you out of the sympathetic nervous system, which is the fight, flight, freeze, and puts you into the parasympathetic mode, which is the tending and refreshing and calming. And this is the hand. Not everyone can see this. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's something called the hand model of the brain. And if you could see it, you would see that when the midbrain is agitated, it kicks the higher executive brain offline. So what you want to do is calm the middle part that's like going nuts.
Yeah.
So that the higher brain can be back online and integrated, and then they can talk to each other. Like I said, they can say, I don't really like what's happening here. And the higher brain can say, I got it.
Right.
And so you're creating your life, living your life, and enjoying your life, not from a suffering state, but from a clearer, calmer, happier state. So I always...
That's beautiful. Yes.
And I have an instruction sheet for that, which is on the website. And it's complimentary. So
excellent. Yes. And that's something, even our cortisol levels went up so much this year. Everybody got the COVID-20 and that's related to the stress.
Yeah.
Making really sound decisions needs to come from a grounded place where you do the breathing, where you're able to get really centered and not have it be coming from fear. Fear-based decisions usually they're not clear, and they're not really the best decisions.
For the long run, certainly. We mentioned the COVID-20. So Robert Sapolsky, who I think is out in your neck of the woods, he's a neuroscientist. He wrote this book called Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. And it's about the cortisol level. So like if it's time for lunch for the zebra eats and it's done. It's time for lunch. What do we have in the refrigerator? Well, what are we having for dinner? If we're having a big dinner, maybe we shouldn't have eaten that. And then, and it goes on and on and on. And we put ourselves into a state. And he says we're the only animal that torments ourselves like that. The rest of them, it's time for lunch. They have lunch and they're done.
Then there's my dog, because that dog of mine is like only eats special food.
Oh, la-di-da.
It's like a picky little, I'm like, where did you get that? And I was like, wait a minute, because we're like organic, healthy, special food. I'm like,
where did he get that from you, right?
Just from us. How funny. Isn't that funny? Because we're being very conscious right now about what we're eating, and like, okay, it's got to be organic, and when you're having your salad and your shake, a protein shake and a da-da-da, and it's got to be organic and non this and non that. And the dog got picky. So even our pets will show us how we're being. That's so good. Yes. Well, I'd love for you to share a little bit more with the audience about how they could maybe work with you, get in contact with you, get your book and some of your programs.
Okay. So if you go to my website, everything is there. So the website will have the icons for the Facebook and the LinkedIn and the Instagram, and I forget what the other one is, Twitter, right? So the website also has the complimentary exercises. There's a box that says complimentary on it, and there's a pull down, and people can help themselves to any or all of those. And there's also a join the email list. So if people do that, then the pub date on the book is March 10th. Wonderful. So if I'll be keeping people posted, maybe even asking people to weigh in on the covers when I have a couple of them to have to pick from. So if anybody wants to get into the system that way, then I can let them know when the book is actually available. I want to tell you that you can tell, I have stories. We all have stories. Yes. I started each chapter with a vignette from my life, and then went on to theory and practice, and ended each chapter with a case example and an exercise. So there are 10 exercises in the book also. So, yeah.
Very nice. Very nice. And what is the website again?
Yeah, so it's MadelaineWeiss.com, MaDelaine, MadelaineWeiss.com.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you for being a guest on the show.
Oh, this was fun, Sheila. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. We will be back shortly. All right. Stay tuned. All right. We are back. If you are just tuning in, this is the Sheila Mac Show, reality at its finest. Here we have real people sharing real stories and actionable steps to help you reinvent, rebuild, and reboot your business and personal life on your terms. I'm your host, Sheila Mac, and our topic today, I'd like to discuss the really sacred topic of that journey that some of us have to take, walking through the stages of grieving to healing. Now, that is something that I wrote about in my new book, Bootstraps and Bra Straps, the formula to go from rock bottom back into action in any situation. And I also walked through my own stages of healing and grieving this last year when we lost my youngest son to a heart condition. So this may help if you know anyone who is going through the grieving process right now. All right, take a listen. This is from my latest book. In loving memory of my beloved son, Michael Machuca, June 2nd, 1997 to December 21st, 2019. Chapter 2. Feel your feelings. Grief. My dad was diagnosed with cancer and passed away on Father's Day, a few months before my son was born. 3 months later, his mother passed away, joining my paternal grandfather, who had passed away when I was younger. 6 months after that, my grandmother's death, my maternal grandfather passed away. Then my maternal grandmother, the last of my grandparents, passed away too. I lost all of these relatives in such a short period of time. I had 4 gift stores and was getting the 5th up and running. I had just given birth to my youngest child, and I was taking care of the other people who were still alive, and they were grieving too. I noticed that my remaining family and our close friends all grieved differently. Some people cried straight on for a couple of weeks or months and just really disconnected from society. They went into complete grieving, like they took a grief vacation. Other people who had a tendency to drink or use other substances went off the deep end with their addiction as a coping mechanism. Then they had to get through that backslide and get back on their feet and out of whatever bad habit was brought back into their life. I had never faced so much death or had anything big to grieve before. I didn't know what to expect of myself or how to process this grief and sadness. I still had to function. I had to pay the bills, take care of the kids, do all the things that a parent does. I had other elders who were still living, who were sick and needed care. I didn't have the luxury of taking that grieving break, although that would have been helpful and healthier. So I worked for 14 to 16 hours straight until I was ready to collapse from exhaustion. I remodeled every store. I redid all the displays. I decorated for every new sale. When the store closed and it was after hours, I would listen to music, sing, and cry while I designed. I didn't let it out all at once, but in little bits at a time. It took a good 6 months to cry out all my tears after my dad died, and of course, in those 6 months, somebody else died. I wasn't done. I was back at it again, but this time I knew how I processed it. I never took time off, but work was my therapy. That was my drug of choice, and it was a very productive one. I just worked and cried in the privacy of my own space. When I was with customers, I had my public face on. I would greet them and be present and happy and help them find what they were looking for. I was able to take a small break from grieving in those moments, and that was a relief. I didn't have to grieve full time. It wasn't until a couple years later, after my father and grandparents had died, that I realized it took longer, maybe, for me to process because I only let little bits out at a time instead of having a total breakdown. I slid slowly into that rock bottom instead of diving headfirst. Through the fog. Grief looks different for everybody. Each person goes through the grief process in their own way and for different lengths of time. You might need 6 months of solid grieving or a year, or you might let it out a little bit at a time like I did. You could have advice from the best people on the planet, but until you're ready, you can't move on. I have an older friend whose husband died, and she had to go through a 2-year time frame of dealing with her grief and adjusting to her loss. She calls this transitional time the fog. Grief and the ensuing fog can come for anyone, and you just need to give it time. If you move on too soon, you're not healed up
and you can end up in a new broken situation, whether that's a bad relationship or battling an addiction. It's best not to make huge decisions until you get through the fog, so you don't make the wrong choices. If you do need to make a serious decision, make sure to consult an expert, get second or third opinions, and listen to your intuition. You need to get through the fog in order to get to a healthier, happier place. You are not alone, and the fog will not last forever. That I can promise. Know that there's a point when you're finished grieving, but that doesn't mean you will never grieve again. My dad died on Father's Day, so every year when Father's Day comes around, I'm still melancholy. I choose to celebrate the magic memories I had with my dad and am grateful to be connected to all my cousins who are on his side of my family. Today, I have happy memories, and once in a while I shed a tear for those who have transitioned. The pain of my loss has lessened with time, yet it had to be on my time. I've come to terms with my family's transition. Now, I feel my relatives who have passed are all spiritual beings helping me out here and there. I will often say to myself, I wonder how my dad or grandparents would have dealt with this situation. Then I can almost hear their words of wisdom. All their wisdom and memories are planted in the pocket of my heart as an additional guide and resource for me, always. We are still very much connected. Our relationship has just changed a little. I'm always grateful for their memories and the legacy of wisdom they left for me. 20 years later, you still honor and grieve your loved ones in one way or another. It's not like they disappear from your heart. You just come to a different place where it's not as difficult as when it first happened. Until you're ready and able to move on, nobody can push you. The door is open. There's no lock on the door, but you have to walk through it on your own. Say goodbye to other people's expectations. Just as there's no right or wrong length of time for the grieving process, there's also no right or wrong way to process that grief. When you're grieving and going through this personal situation, you're going to have a lot of people who try to help you through it or expect you to just get over it. How you grieve and process that grief is right for you. No one can tell you exactly what you need. Honor the time it takes for you to grieve. Walk and work through it rather than just trying to get over it. Walking through the grieving journey is natural, normal, completely healthy, and sane. It's part of our process as human beings. Honor that part of you as much as you honor the part that laughs and plays and does fun things. That emotion of grief is just as good and helpful and purposeful as any other emotion we have. It's sometimes looked down on in society, or we're made to feel like we have to hide our grief. You can do whatever you choose to do with that, but don't hide it from yourself. It's like any kind of healing. If you want to heal, you're going to have to go through the pain. To get to that other side, you have to come to terms with it in your own way.
And now I have some homework for you. I would love for you to grab a copy of my new best-selling book, Bootstraps and Bra Straps, the formula to go from rock bottom back into action in any situation. It is now available on Audible as well as on Amazon and Kindle and at www.sheilamac.com. I will be donating a book or course. If you look online, you'll see the courses I offer as well, to women's shelters across the United States and Canada whenever a course or book is purchased. So check it out, and I look forward to sharing more with you next time. As always, I wish you life, love, laughter, and light.